Oh, hi all. Hello. Let me lower this in a little bit. A little smidge. It's a little loud. There we go. Is that better? Nope, nope, nope. It's coming out the wrong hole. No! Hold on, I messed with my sound levels. I messed with my sound levels and now it's all jacked up. No! Wait, I can fix this. Lower that down to barely audible for me. There we go. It's no longer being picked up by the mic. And no, I refuse to wear a headset. This is my studio and I will do it how I want. Alright, my head's a little weird. I shouldn't be showing y'all this part, but I don't care. We're doing it live. And whoop. Yeah, usually I'm a little tilted down. There we go. Much better. No, a little more. There we go. That's the right angle. Anywho, before we really dive into it, let me go ahead and shush that, because we're going to be talking about a fun topic. Okay, so I've got a hint about what we're talking about. We're going to be following up a little bit on last week's vampire burials and deviant burials. So it's going to be a follow-up on that, and that's all I'm aware of. I haven't dug into or, pre-read what this paper is going to be about at all. I just took like a quick little peek to check the formatting, to know if I was going to be happy about the SciComm, SciComm, but the format in which it's written. And if you've been a regular watcher, you know how much I like to bitch about that. But no, I don't really know what to expect. I haven't even read the abstract. But yes, Unusual Burials and Necrophobia by Anastasia Slaliki, I guess. I decided to go a little more emergent in this one. I've been having a lot of fun this week. But before we go crazy about it, since this is going to deal with some more of the liminal topics, let's go ahead and take a moment, take a breath. Let me switch from my standing mode to my seating mode on my desk. So the model's gonna wig out. Here we go. Wheelie chair mode activated. So yeah, it's gonna be emergent. It's gonna be chill. I'm gonna take a moment to take a couple deep breaths. You know exactly what video I'm gonna pull up. Death by Snoo. No. Why? Because it's important. It gets us in the mood. So, take a moment. Quiet. Take a breath. Take a deep breath. In. Out. Let's chill. Let's relax. And let me refresh my page because I don't even know if I'm actually online. There we go. So, let's go ahead and watch this scene.
You were sure I was going to survive, were you?
I was quite confident.
Good. Now, tell me...
What would have happened if you hadn't saved him?
Yes.
The sun would not have risen.
Then what would have happened?
A mere ball of flaming gas would have illuminated the world.
All right, I'm not stupid. You're saying that humans need fantasies to make life bearable?
No. Humans need fantasy to be human. To be the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape.
With tooth fairies, hogfathers.
Yes. As practice, you have to start out learning to believe the little lies.
So we can believe the big ones.
Yes. Justice, mercy, duty, that sort of thing.
They're not the same at all.
You think so? Then take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder and sieve it through the finest sieve, and then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy.
Breath.
And yet, you try to act as if there is some ideal order in the world, as if there is some rightness in the universe by which it may be judged.
But people have got to believe that. What's the point?
You need to believe in things that aren't true. How else can they become?
So, we are all good. We're all calm. We've got our anthropological hats on. We're in the right headspace. Are we ready? One final deep breath. And let's get into this. So, let's start with the abstract. Unusual or deviant burials are considered to be cases where the individual has been buried in a different way relative to the norm for the period and or the population under examination. Deformity and disease received scholarly attention in antiquity, but at the same time, they have also been the focus of social prejudice and superstition. Anthropological and ethnographical investigation has revealed that socially deviant and diseased individuals may receive different mortuary treatment relative to unaffected members of a society. In some cases, unusual disposal is accompanied by evidence of practices which indicate a fear of the dead. Necrophobia. Ooh, we got our first vocabulary word. These practices usually include methods for the restriction of the dead in the grave by weighing down the body with large rocks, decapitation or the use of nails, wedges, and rivets. For example, vampirism can be seen as a notion based on necrophobia, since legend indicates the vampire is a reanimated dead body. Anthropology and folklore have studied superstitional social fear for long, but the archaeology of fear, based on the study and interpretation of evidence from the funerary archaeological record, is a relatively new concept. Although deviant individuals were not always treated differently in life or death, and were not necessarily regarded as outcasts or misfits, it is important for anthropologists and archaeologists to combine social, biological, and burial data, as this approach may enable us to improve our understanding of atypical burials in the past. And now, for no particular reason, let me go ahead and bring up another video that, for some reason has kind of, well, you'll see it when you see it. Just give me 1 second to pull it up. You'll know what I mean.
So if it didn't...
There we go. Found it. Let me pull it up. This is a skit. It's supposed to be humorous. It's supposed to... Well, if you've seen it before, you know what I'm going to show you. If you haven't, well... I'm not saying anything. I'm just going to let it speak for itself. And you already know the mindset that we're at, plus what we just read from the abstract. Let me go ahead and pause the music again.
So if it isn't Tylenol, why is the autism exploding everywhere?
Because we stopped abandoning them in the forest.
Excuse me?
They have always been autistic people, just like they have always been gay people, people with cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, etc. Know what society used to do with those people?
It's the vaccines. When my Susie got her vaccines, she changed into a different person.
Much of Europe used to believe in fairies.
What's that got to...
European cultures held a belief for nearly 2,000 years, first documented in the 7th century and probably originating far earlier, that a sudden change in a behavior of a child, like if it became emotionally distant, or too emotional, or if they seemed to know more than they should, or stopped being social, or started having health problems. They thought that fairies had stolen their child and replaced it with a changeling.
A what now?
And they had different methods of making sure, like shouting at it and beating it, or putting it in a pot of water over the fire until it confessed to being a changeling.
If that sounds like that was way, way long ago, remember that this very same treatment of left-handed people, for example, is still very recent. And it was what? They were demonized in several circles, in several cultural circles and communities. And yes, the word demonized is being said literally. Until the 1970s. You know, if the other stuff that was said didn't make it feel like home, or didn't hit home, or didn't make it feel real. But I'm just going to let the skit finish. And then we'll go back to the reading.
Man, have we come a long way.
Have we? Sure, we don't abandon them in the forest to return to the fairies, and we don't drown, boil, or burn them anymore. But we still talk about autism as if it is something evil that has stolen a person away.
But all that was a long time ago. It doesn't explain.
Autistic and other disabled people were dying from superstitious methods to try to drive out the changeling as recently as the turn of the last century. Funny enough, autism was starting to be identified as a medical condition not too many years after that.
So what about...
Remember that things like exorcisms are still happening. And they were publicly happening, in the 80s. The movie The Exorcist did not come out of nothing. Just saying. If that's a rabbit hole you want to go down.
About the last 100 years?
Us autistics went from changeling to institutionalized to now cursed by a magic potion during pregnancy. We're always talked about like we're less than human and a burden on society. So what's really changed?
No, just some food for thought. Not trying to press one thing or another, just giving you all something to think about. Put the music back on. There we go. And let's actually start reading. Introduction. In an effort to understand ancient humans, archaeology obtains a plethora of evidence from cemeteries and the burials within. By exploring the manner of death and the treatment of the dead, it may be possible to gain a clearer picture of the living, of their society, practices, and spirituality. Archaeological investigation has revealed the phenomenon of unusual burials. These are cases where an individual has been buried in a different way than what is considered the norm for the period and or the population under examination. Unusual burials can also be termed atypical, anomalous, extraordinary, non-normative, abnormal, or deviant. And you know what? I appreciate you for giving the different synonymous terms, because depending on which term you use when you're writing your report, it does give, an image of what you're trying to present. So, methodology. The theoretical premise of the research presented hereinafter is that the type of burial, together with the analysis of associated human skeletal remains, may reveal significant information about about the nature of the life, status, and manner of death of an individual. For instance, evidence of trauma, disease, and/or deformity in the skeleton may offer an insight into an individual's deviant treatment. An extensive literature review has been conducted for the purposes of establishing the necessary theoretical basis concerning death and its related subjects, and to identify the usual burial customs and beliefs for the groups and periods under study. This was necessary to enable the detection and selection of the case studies included in the paper, and to enable these findings to be placed within the broader funerary context. Anastasia, I just want to say, I really appreciate your use of flow when writing. Just mwah, chef's kiss. I am able to read this without any interruptions to the tempo, to the flow. Oh, you've done Gary Provost proud. Oh, this is beautiful. Unusual burials are often difficult to locate in the archaeological record, as this depends on the experience of the excavators and recorders, in addition to the background knowledge and aims of those responsible for interpreting the finds. Furthermore, it is difficult to associate every atypical burial with specific causes of crime or marginality. Both the bones and the burial context play an important role towards the achievement of this aim, as special treatment in the burial record can take many different forms within different cultures. A list of unusual burial traits has been provided in Table 1.1, and we're going to be checking that out in a bit. The list is not considered to be exhaustive, but rather as a reference guide to help with the adequate recording and categorization of unusual cases. Oh, that is such a load-bearing sentence. Oh, I really appreciate you as a writer. As an academic writer, oh, this has been great. I haven't read a paper with this good a flow in a long time. Wow. Great job. I hope you're still writing. In some cases, unusual disposal is accompanied by evidence of practices which appear to indicate fear of the dead, necrophobia. Ooh, and you're restating your definition and the vocabulary word. Great job. It's the little things when you're writing papers, academic papers, research papers, etc. It's the little things that add up. When you're introducing terms, even if you're writing to let's say, an audience of peers, you still want to treat your reader with respect, compassion, comfort. You want your reader to have a good time. And if you've read academic writing, you know that that's not something that's usually, kept in mind. But yeah, it's the little details. This right there, the repeating of the definition, the providing of different synonyms. I really appreciate the use of and or, the slash. Like, it's the little things. It's been great. Necrophobia can be defined as a morbid fear of death and the dead. It is a term used also within medicine, which implies that the phobia may cause extreme or morbid reactions, such as intense anxiety, obsessions, or even a panic attack associated with acute distress, mental confusion, and the fear of impending death. It is a Greek word dividing from nekros, which means dead, and phobos, which means fear. and in Latin it is known as terra mortis. You know what? That was completely unnecessary, but I appreciate it. Alright, we'll look at figure 1 for a moment. Necrophobic practices usually include methods of restriction of the dead within the grave. Let's try that again. Necrophobic practices usually include methods of restriction of the dead within the grave. The fear of the dead seems to have had a substantial influence on burial customs, from which at least as far back as the Neolithic period. Okay, I fucked that one up. That was me. The fear of the dead seems to have had a substantial influence on burial customs from at least as far back as the Neolithic period, and it would appear to have had a worldwide impact. Again, you're saying some pretty basic stuff, but you are introducing a whole brand new topic, and I can see that this is like page 3 in a book, so you're taking it easy. So yeah, this is just an excerpt read that we have to do. Don't worry about that. Just appreciate the academic writing. Appreciate the psychon. Pathology and deviancy. It has been hypothesized that pathological conditions which cause deformities, pathologies... Okay, that was me. I ruined the flow. It has been hypothesized that pathological conditions which cause deformities, pathologies that can affect an individual's mental state and behavior, diseases with social stigma, or a violent death may be linked to the nature of an individual's burial. Social marginalization during life and or death can occur for a wide variety of reasons, including disease, smallpox, leprosy, tuberculosis, and other epidemic infections, congenital and mental conditions, an immoral life, murder, the nature of one's birth, family status, witchcraft, a curse, excommunication, heresy, death prior to baptism, violent death, death by suicide, and improper burial rites. I do appreciate the list of, like, smallpox, leprosy, tuberculosis, because it is prompting me to show you all one of my favorite videos on the internet. There we go.
500 million, but not a single one more.
And before we progress on that video, I'm going to show you all one of the best Wikipedia pages of all time. And all you need is the second word. Yes, that is a fucked up looking picture. But all you need is the second word to just reinvigorate your faith in humanity. Smallpox was. But yes, disease, smallpox, leprosy, tuberculosis, syphilis, gangrene, a lot of other visible illnesses. And is this cropped weird?
We'll never know their names. The first victim could not have been recorded, for there was no written language to record it. They were someone's daughter or son, and someone's friend, and they were loved by those around them. And they were in pain, covered in rashes, confused, scared, not knowing why this was happening to them or what they could do about it. Victims of a mad, inhuman god. There was nothing to be done. Humanity was not strong enough, not aware enough, not knowledgeable enough to fight back against a monster that could not be seen. It was in ancient Egypt, where it attacked slave and pharaoh alike. In Rome, it effortlessly decimated armies. It killed in Syria. It killed in Moscow. In India, 5 million dead. It killed 1,000 Europeans every day in the 18th century. It killed more than 50 million Native Americans. From the Peloponnesian War to the Civil War, it slew more soldiers and civilians than any weapon, any soldier, any army. Not that this stopped the most foolish and empty souls from attempting to harness the demon as a weapon against their enemies. Cultures grew and faltered, and it remained. Empires rose and fell, and it thrived. Ideologies waxed and waned, but it did not care. Kill, maim, spread. An ancient, mad god, hidden from view, that could not be fought, could not be confronted, could not even be comprehended. Not the only one of its kind, but the most devastating. For a long time, there was no hope. Only the bitter, hollow endurance of survivors. In China, in the 10th century, humanity began to fight back. It was observed that survivors of the mad god's curse would never be touched again. They had taken a portion of that power into themselves, and were so protected from it. Not only that, but this power could be shared by consuming a remnant of the wounds. There was a price, for you could not take the god's power without first defeating it, but a smaller battle on humanity's terms. By the 16th century, the technique spread to India, then across Asia, the Ottoman Empire, and, in the 18th century, Europe. In 1796, a more powerful technique was discovered by Edward Jenner. An idea began to take hold. Perhaps the ancient god could be killed. A whisper became a voice became a call became a battle cry, sweeping across villages, cities, nations. Humanity began to cooperate, spreading the protective power across the globe, dispatching masters of the craft to protect whole populations. People who had once been sworn enemies joined in a common cause for this one battle. Governments mandated that all citizens protect themselves, for giving the ancient enemy a single life would put millions in danger. And, inch by inch, humanity drove its enemy back. Fewer friends wept, fewer neighbors were crippled, fewer parents had to bury their children. At the dawn of the 20th century, for the first time, humanity banished the enemy from entire regions of the world. Humanity faltered many times in its efforts, but there were individuals who never gave up, who fought for the dream of a world where no child or loved one would ever fear the demon ever again. Viktor Zhdanov, who called for humanity to unite in a final push against the demon. The great tactician Karl Raschke, who conceived of a strategy to annihilate the enemy. Donald Henderson, who led the efforts in those final days. The enemy grew weaker. Millions became thousands. Thousands became dozens. And then, when the enemy did strike, scores of humans came forth to defy it, protecting all those whom it might endanger. The enemy's last attack in the wild was on Ali Mau Malin in 1977. For months afterwards, dedicated humans swept the surrounding area, seeking out any last desperate hiding place where the enemy might yet remain. They found none. On December 9th, 1979, humanity declared victory. This one evil, the horror from beyond memory, the monster that took 500 million people from this world, was destroyed. You are a member of the species that did that. Never forget what we are capable of when we band together and declare battle on what is broken in the world.
There we go. We got our feel-good Ghibli's going. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. If you ever need your faith in humanity reinvigorated, this always does the trick. But yeah. Alright, let's take a breath and get back to this. In his natural history of AD 77, Pliny the Elder, made a clear connection between a cross-eyed person and evil eye traditions. In Britain, information derived from folk superstition would tend to suggest that personal disability or deformity was often regarded as unlucky in the past. As Shea, well, you know what, I'm not gonna, let's restart. Shea drew attention to pertinent information within the field of sociology and formed three hypotheses regarding deviancy, which were all tested and confirmed by burial data derived from ethnographic cases, but could not always be confronted in archaeological material due to often insufficient nature of the evidence. She proposed that the criteria of deviancy vary in different societies. Deviant burials may not reflect the status of the deceased during their life, but the social identity they acquired by certain actions or circumstances of death. In simple societies, volitional and non volitional forms of deviancy are not distinguished, so they are treated equally at death. I'm going to be honest, I don't know what simple societies means. And you know what? Fuck it. Egalitarian communities with limited technology, little known certification. Okay, that's the AI thing. JAS. What is JAS? Means of computer simulation, artificial societies and social simulation. Okay. One that forms a simple working whole, unsubjected to any other, in which parts certain public ends. Civil societies have a little division of labor. Okay, so this is like an extremely reductive term. Gotcha. Right, so this is one of those terms we don't use anymore. Gotcha. Understood. Makes sense. 1985. Hey, if you're new to archaeology and anthropology, you're gonna encounter a lot of these terms that may be outdated by modern conventions. Skeletons with evidence of tied body parts, skeleton prone position, of necrophobia apparent in burials, being covered in rocks over the weights, bodies found cremated in inhumation sites, skeletons with evidence of decapitation, burials with evidence of rivets or stakes. So basically, the things that we saw in revenant burials last week, or burials where you make sure that the buried person stays buried or stays dead. Although deviant individuals were not always treated differently in life or death, and were not necessarily seen as outcasts or misfits, it is important for anthropologists and archaeologists to combine information derived from social, biological, and burial data, as this approach may improve our understanding of atypical burials in the past. The Special Dead. Ucko. Hey, we read them like a couple weeks ago. Ucko successfully demonstrated the variability of body treatment and the dynamic nature of human societies as early as the 1960s using ethnographic parallels, which he believed could widen the horizons of archaeological interpretation. For instance, fear of the dead has been noted in Kenya and amongst other African people. These groups treated a wide variety of individuals within their society: leprosy sufferers, young children, those killed by lightning, those who died in childbirth, those who had a violent death in battle, those who drowned, those who died from smallpox or dropsy, witches, twins, priests, chiefs, murderers, suicide victims, and the very old differently at burial. Yeah, we read a paper about that. The very young infants who did not yet have their first teeth, and the very old who did not have teeth anymore, could be considered to be closer to the land of spirits. What was the name of that paper? You know what? It doesn't matter. We read it a couple weeks ago. The VOD is still probably up there. It'll be fun if you guys want to look it up. In other cultures, such as among the Romans, neonates and infants were buried at night in a closed family ceremony because the very young had a marginal status and no public identity, so their burial could not be a social event of the community. Roman writers referred to the dead of young children as mors acerba, unripe death, or mors immatura, untimely death. Norman, right, we didn't pick that one for a couple of weeks ago, I think. Similarly, special dead in the ancient Greek world were the auroi, the untimely dead, such as infants, young adults, and the unmarried. They were feared because witches saw them as suitable couriers of katadesmoi, curse tablets. Special dead also included heroes and the war dead, who were highly respected, as well as the murdered and their killers. If that's sort of like starting to lose you about what does special dead mean, I'm assuming most of whoever's listening is an American audience. Think of Arlington Cemetery in Virginia, military cemeteries. Those house special dead. Those house military personnel. There you go. There's an example of special dead. And they get, special burial rituals, military honors. If you've never seen a military burial, YouTube is a thing. It's pretty emotional. It's very respectful. It's a whole ritual. I've participated in a couple, and it's an experience. It's an experience. You have to be disciplined and mindful and centered so that you execute the actions that you're supposed to do when the command rings. You can't let yourself be swept up by emotion or by the moment. Alright, so let's get back to the reading. Special dead also included heroes and the war dead who are highly respected, as well as murdered and their killers. The latter constituted feared and unquiet dead. The murdered were angry against their killers, and those who did not avenge their violent death. The killers, on the other hand, were afraid of being haunted by their victims and were condemned to shamefully wander after death. As Aeschylus wrote about Clytemnestra, Plato, in his Laws, recommended that murderers should be executed and their bodies cast out of the victim's country without any burial rites performed. He stated that those found guilty of the murder of a family member or infanticide should be executed and dumped naked at a crossroads outside the city. He also suggested that a stone should be thrown at all the archons on the corpse's head in the name of the state, using overkill as an expiatory act for the crime, and that the body should then be left outside of the city without burial. Xenophon in Hellenica wrote that Athens' traitors and tomb robbers would be thrown to the Varathron, gulch or pit, situated in or near the Demos of Melite. In Sparta, the bodies of condemned criminals were thought to have been thrown into the Kairas, spelled as Kaidas or Kaidas, although there is no conclusive archaeological evidence to support this assertion. Another category, suicide victims, were condemned by Christianity as early as the 5th century AD. It is difficult to determine the ancient Greek attitude towards such individuals. However, as Homer and the tragic poets saw suicide as appropriate under certain circumstances, although Pythagoreanism and Platonism condemned it as a kind of hubris. You know what? I'm not going to retry that sentence. Aristotle indicates that suicide was seen as socially irresponsible and illegal in Athens. Suicide was viewed as an untimely and violent death. Aeschylus and Plato indicated that the spirits of these dead were feared and that the interpreters of sacred law needed to be consulted on purification rituals and the burial of a suicide victim. The oblatoi, though struck by lightning, were regarded with reverence by ancient Greeks as they were thought to have been killed by Zeus himself. Plutarch reported that their bodies were believed to be incorruptible, and sometimes they were left where they had been struck without burial. Deuteropoptmoi? Those who were thought to have died abroad but subsequently returned home alive were considered impure and had to go through cleansing rites. Well, damn, it's your own fault for thinking that they were dead. Finally, the most fearful and dangerous category of dead were the ataphoi, those who remained unburied. In epic poetry and tragedy, it was stated that they could not enter Hades and that they haunted the living. The attribution of proper burial rites was a matter of dignity and responsibility for the living, as witnessed by Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, and the tragedy of Antigone by Sophocles. If the body was not found, it was necessary to create a cenotaph burial, sometimes with a stone as a substitute for the body. And if you've played RimWorld with the Ideologian DLC, you get to do that too. Which, by the way, if you haven't played RimWorld with the Ideologian DLC, try it. It's fun. Take a moment. Breathe. Hydrate. Take a sip. Check your notifications. Harmful entities. Ghosts, demons, and the undead. Many peoples believe the soul of the deceased does not reach its final destination immediately after death, but remains for a time marginally between worlds. During this liminal period, the soul is believed to be vulnerable to attack by evil spirits. The fear of revenants is based on this theory. I'm gonna hold. I was gonna pull up the Mini Minuteman video, but I'm gonna hold. The corpse is thus seen as polluting, and cathartic measures are applied both before and after the funeral. Even in non-Western cultures, as in ancient and contemporary Japan, the spirits of the dead are considered to be potentially dangerous and may wander for many weeks. Yes, they have several yokai that are about that. Very fun stories. You should go check out the rabbit hole about different yokai. They have several psychopomps too. If appropriate rituals are not performed, the soul cannot move on to the land of the dead to meet the ancestors. These wandering spirits suffer from bitterness and malice and can curse their descendants. Those who died a violent or untimely death, also, that's another term for bad death. You know what? I appreciate you having that there. Are also believed to be filled with hate and spite, and it is anticipated that they will return to hurt the living. It is thus necessary to be purified by a series of rites before and after the funeral. Ghost stories are abundant in Japan. You know what? Since Twitter is currently having a US and Japan cultural exchange, I'm gonna go ahead and screenshot that later and post it. See if we get any fun archaeology stories. In ancient Greek and Roman worlds, there was a plethora of harmful entities, such as the lamia, or the larvae, or the empusae, or the lemures, and the sturgis, the mormon, the ephilte, and the hyphilte, equivalent to incubi and succubi. who were thought to attack people in their sleep. Oh, we have a couple of those in Latin America. We call them the cuco. Almost every different region has their own version of the cuco and the garabato. There were also special festivals for the honor and appeasement of the dead, such as the Anfesteria in Athens and the Roman Lemuria, Ralia, and Saturnalia, which were very closely connected to the idea that malignant spirits or ghosts existed who wanted to feed upon the vitality of the living. Ancient Greek and Roman beliefs concerning ghosts, witches, and revenants have been preserved mainly in the writings of the following classical authors: Photius, do I want to read these? I'm just reading them silently, see if I want to read them out loud, because if it's just a whole bunch of me butchering words, I'd rather you read them on your own. Like, I'm leaving them on the page so you can read them as well. What the fuck am I reading? In his Mirabilia, Book of Marvels, he presented the story of a young girl named Philinian who got out of her grave and seduced young Mechades. A diviner ordered her body to be burned to ashes in a remote spot outside of the city walls. After the whole city was ritually cleansed with holy illustrations. In another story, Polycrates died suddenly, but then returned from his grave to kill and eat his newborn hermaphrodite child, who was considered to be an ill omen. But what? What the fuck is this? This sounds. I'm gonna have to like check the Wikipedia and like check the rabbit hole on this. This sounds like wow. Sounds like a lot. It sounds crazy. It's awesome. Lucan, in his poem Pharsalia, was left in her grave, and the ability to raise the dead. Morphoses, blood. Showing the younger. Is it younger? There's an elder. The writings of. It is probably the case that people sometimes practice unusual burials with apotropaic and preventative purposes in order to deal with the fear of the rising dead and revengeful ghosts. Okay, what does apotropaic mean? Okay. And apparently I've Googled this before. According to Kyle, damn it, Kyle. Alright, so, according to Kyle, pagan Romans were scared of the bodies of executed Christians, even more so because they were aware that Christians believed in resurrection. As a response to this fear, they burned the corpses of Christians to assure that they would not resurrect and seek revenge. Oh, that's funny. I'm going to need to send that snip to a friend of mine. That is very into like Christian history, and they'll probably appreciate it. Despite a widespread general belief to the contrary, stories of the undead also existed in medieval Britain. In William of Newburgh's Chronicles, chapters 22 through 24, narrative relative events, which allegedly occurred in AD 1196, during the reign of King Richard I. One story in the country of Buckinghamshire describes how a dead man wandered out of his grave, attacked his wife, harassed his brothers, and beset animals. The living sought help from the church, and the Bishop of Lincoln wrote a chartula of episcopal absolution and sent it to the local archdeacon with orders to open the grave and lay the chartula upon the breast of the corpse. When the tomb was opened, the body was found to have been incorrupt, but after the archdeacon acted as instructed, it was reported that the dead man never wandered from his grave again. In fact, the British vampire of this story shares a lot in common with traditions concerning the Greek vampire, which have been found to be slightly different from those of Slavonic vampires. In Greece, the term for a vampire is used to delineate a corpse reanimated by a demon who does not necessarily drink blood, but seeks to harm the living by attacking them, killing their animals, and disturbing the household. So, we've got 3 different kinds of vampires at least. And also we've got revenants, the living dead, the walking dead, the resurrected dead, and several other kinds of, reanimated dead. After the 12th century AD, however, the tradition of vampires seems to have died out in Britain, while the fear of witchcraft increased. It is interesting to note that the classic study of witchcraft, Malleus Maleficarum, okay, I was about to say it, written in 1486 by the 2 Dominican friars, Father Kramer and Sprague, also mentions remedies against the vampiric demons incubi and succubi. But yeah, if you want to go down this rabbit hole, Never Again the Burning Times, and what's another good book? Well, there's several. But yeah, there's a whole lot of the history you can go down in the history of witchcraft. It is just, wow, really interesting. It is known that, witchcraft, paganism, and alternative Christianities for that area. It's just incredible history. Very bloody, very dark, but also incredible. It is known that until 1823, those who committed suicide in Britain were denied burial in consecrated grounds and were interred by the public roadway or at crossroads, in some cases with a wooden stake having been driven through their bodies. Written evidence for this practice exists, for instance, from Derbyshire, dating to 1573. This custom is believed to have been applied as a deterrent to others, but since a suicide victim's body was considered to be cursed by the church and deprived of a religious burial, the fear of the dead cannot be excluded. An Act of Parliament of 1823 banned the driving of a stake through the body, and, after this time, suicide victims were interred in a proper burial ground, but between 9 and 12 at night and without religious rites. These limitations were removed in 1882. Relatively recent. Like the skit at the start of this stream, around the turn of the century. As noted above, Greece has a very long tradition of revenants and blood-sucking creatures, dating back to ancient times. In Byzantium, Slavic influence in conjunction with the precepts of the Greek Orthodox Church formed the legend of the Greek vampire species Vrikolakas. Related superstitions have been recorded in Byzantine and post-Byzantine Christian texts, Orthodox canon laws, novels, folk songs, and manuscripts, which were written both by Greeks and Western travelers in Greece. Priests attempted to explain the phenomenon and also carried out destruction of the revenants. Major etiologies? Is that a word? Study of causation. Okay. Learned something new today. Alright, major etiologies for the creation of vampires were considered to have been excommunication and the incorruptibility of the corpse, so special prayers were applied to enable priests to revoke an excommunication. Related texts have been found in the codices of the monasteries of Mount Athos and Meteora. Many of them originate from the peak period of the vampire craze in Greece, the 17th to 19th centuries AD. Protective amulets in the shape of crosses and pentagrams were worn by the living, placed on the corpse, or hung from the house. In addition, salt, garlic, vinegar, sulfur, onion, and quicklime were used as apotropaic, we learned that word earlier, it means warding, substances, probably because of their strong smell and or caustic action. Alright, we're getting into case studies. Researchers in anthropology and folklore have long studied superstitional social fear, but the interest in the archaeology of fear, based on the study and interpretation of evidence from the funerary archaeological record, is relatively recent. 5 examples of deviant burials, 1 from Cyprus, 3 from Greece, and 1 from Italy, would now be presented and briefly discussed. The aim of this section of the text is to demonstrate the wide chronological and geographical span of this phenomenon. Ooh, okay, I appreciate that you're giving like the aim. Really love that. Maybe you should have gone from, beyond Europe and the Mediterranean. Maybe. China, Japan. We've got a lot in South America, Haiti, Jamaica. I'm trying to think of like specific ones. Indonesia, Vietnam, Peru. Like, you could have gone outside of just Europe. All right. Well, you're going. I've already seen you're going by age, so this is all. We're gonna go geographic span though. All right. Kyrokidea in Cyprus. Burials at Kyrokidea have been found within the settlement, and in most cases they were placed under the house floor. The bodies were buried in pit graves in a flex position. Heavy millstones were then placed in the head. Our body may attest to necrophobic beliefs and practices. Similar practices have been reported from other Neolithic and Chalcolithic Cypriot sites. Fight 2, initially flexed and prone individuals. Okay. Cabo Colonna. 2 cis graves excavated. Possible sacred area and dated back to proto-geometric times. Large sandstone had been placed over each of the interred individuals. The area was considered to be sacred since a building, which may have been a temple, and a circular pit of unknown function were located near the graves. Grave 1 was found to have included the remains of 2 young adult males and an adolescent, while Grave 2 contained the young adult male. All 3 of the individuals recovered from Grave 1 displayed allopathological lesions, in addition to per-mortem or post-mortem tooth ablation. Okay. Spondylitis. Oh, and you're giving us pictures. Intentionally artificially deformed. Arms have been tied behind his back. Okay then. Sacrificial victims, the large rocks have been tied to the bodies that have feared to prevent them rising to their graves and seeking revenge of those responsible for their deaths. Alright, so where is the meat of this one? A large sarcophagus has been deliberately positioned in the center of the body. In other cases, a skeleton was positioned when this. The latter individually appeared to have a major fracture of the tibia and was possibly infected. These burials were deviant. Well, yeah, you're talking about deviant burials, and, well, we are talking about unusual burials, but I'm not seeing where the necrophobia in this one, unless I missed it. Simple grave goods. Alright, moving on. Disarticulated human remains. The lime kiln disuse. The body and the position. The main individual was abnormal, and the position had been deliberately cut. Oh, okay. Wait, hold up. Wait a minute. Miranda in Attica, 4th century AD. The second effort of prehistoric and classical antiquities, under the direction of Dr. Cacavogiani, conducted large-scale rescue excavation at the site of Miranda in Attica. A collection of disarticulated human remains were discovered in a lime kiln during 2002. According to the excavators, the lime kiln was in disuse when the burial took place. The deep pit of the kiln was deliberately sealed with large rocks, which were located. Okay, so this was in a sealed chamber. So somebody wanted this body just forever to be sealed there. Among the incomplete remains of a probable male adult, the body position of the main individual was abnormal, appears to have been deliberately cut in half before the body had fully decomposed and while the skeleton was still articulated. It is not possible to ascertain, however, this had occurred during the ante, peri, or postmortem periods. The head, torso, and upper limbs, along with the right ilium, were found deposited prone in anatomical articulation. So this person was cut in half at some moment around their time of death, before, during, or after, unknown. And this was done intentionally. Location of body, where likely. While cleaning the area of the main individual's lower torso, these bodies belong to an adult male. The excavators are adamant that no other skeletal remains were found in the kiln. This raises the questions of what happened to the rest of the second body. So, one person was cut in half. Second body, parts of it were deposited within that person. And then a third person was within the second person, which was within the first person. If I read that correctly. That's fucked up. Okay. And that's why it's a deviant burial. But likely strong punishments and further humiliation of a wrongdoer. The modest burial of these skeletal remains was performed in a pagan way, with a small plain trefoil Roman jar having been placed near the body, in addition to a coin from the reign of Constantine. The latter object may have been the boat fare to Charon. In an effort to interpret this unusual case, one probable scenario could be religious persecution against pagans. However, in this case, one would expect a larger scale of events and more victims present. Alternatively, the study of the position of women in Greco-Roman and Byzantine societies, law and ritualized punitive executions, could suggest adultery. Another more serious crime was the relationship between a free woman and a slave. In the 4th century AD, Constantine enacted a number of laws against marriages between partners of different social status. If such unions were then discovered, the offenders were to be executed. Okay then. Let's see, this final case. Oh, pictures are not great. This grave, 3 bent spikes, each approximately upon association. Location of the long wedges within the grave was very unusual, and they cannot be explained as coffin fittings. Okay, so this person was buried with bent spikes around them. The remains of the individual displayed a wide range of pathologies and deformities, some of which may explain his atypical post-mortem treatment. Frontal sinusitis with a large cloaca formation of the right nation, which resulted in asymmetry of the supraorbital ridges. Alright, so facial deformities. So their entire face was kind of messed up. Could be facial paralysis due to neurological and okay, so facial deformities. Been to macron grams did not reveal any evidence of fractures or other pathology. A healing linear fracture over the left eye orbit is a consequence of trauma. The man appears to have managed to live a long life despite his deformities. The nature of the frontal injury, however, may suggest that he had engaged in interpersonal violence, and it's possible that he had been socially stigmatized because of his facial deformities. Spikes in his grave may be related to rituals which were known to have been undertaken in order to prevent the corpse from becoming a vampire. Physical disability is known to be a factor which can predispose an individual to become a vampire, and means of prevention include, among others, proper burial, pounding nails into various body parts, putting stakes and nails in the coffin to prevent the bloating of the corpse, which the popular mind was a sign of vampiric transformations. And again, refer to the video from way at the start about physical disabilities. But yeah, this person lived a long life, so good for them, I guess. Wish we knew their story. To summarize, folklore and literary sources have long provided information on necrophobia, deviancy, and marginality in human societies, as has been shown above and through the writings of classical and medieval authors, and the brief analysis of the vampire legend. Archaeology, on the other hand, is largely based on excavation and evidence, as demonstrated from the case studies discussed. This paper aspires to show the potential benefits that could be gained from collaborative framework between anthropology, paleopathology, sociology, literature, archaeology, and related disciplines for the optimum recovery, recording, and interpretation of the remains of past societies. Beyond the facts provided by osteological examinations, the process of interpretation in archaeology and anthropology, especially of unusual burial contexts, can sometimes be perceived as risky, with the formulation of hypotheses that may appear far-fetched. However, when undertaken with reference to scientific methods, and by following an objective approach, interpretation is vital in order to provide an understanding of skeletal remains and to enable insights to be gained concerning the material and cognitive aspects of past cultures. You know what? Well done. You kind of meandered. I'll give you that. You meandered. You probably could have picked a wider geographical size, geographical distance for your case studies. Especially since, like you mentioned, Japan and other places earlier. But I understand that for your audience, you probably want to keep it within the familiar. But overall, for it being a chapter 1, very well done. Very easy to read. I love that even the in-text citations are not that disruptive. And you definitely put in work when, you know, writing your narratives. Gary Provost would be proud. Varying your sentence lengths. You know, keeping the language simple. Repetition of points. Lists and using, lists. And the use of like approaching the topic of, approaching the education with compassion. Like you're treating your reader with respect and like you want to enrich your reader. So honestly, Anastasia, well done. Best paper I've read so far. And it was quick. So you know what? That was fun. I was kind of dreading it. But we finished way ahead of time. Well within my schedule. Like, we did great. So I'm happy. I'm proud of this. Only took an hour. Oh yeah. I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna submit this. And we are gonna do great. Thank you all for being here. I appreciate all your faces. As always, I'm down to, listen to feedback. And I will see you all next time. Good night.